Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Andy Caffrey. I'm one of the 3 candidates running for Congress for our district this year. The primary is June 3rd. There are 2 of us who are registered Democrats, and there's 1 Republican. And the way it breaks down is there's an incumbent and 2 guys from Garberville. That's the race. So my politics are green, and I'm running to basically challenge democratic liberal politics with Earth First, Deep Ecology, green politics. And if you guys get me past the Republican on June 3rd, then we will have the first national green politics versus liberal democratic politics debate in the nation's history. Because for the presidential debates, they wouldn't let the Greens speak. And I'm green even though I'm registered Democrat. So it's going to be a very interesting race, unlike any in the country before, and I hope you'll get involved. And so what I'd like to do is start talking about change. How do we make change, and what are we actually trying to do here? You know, there's a bunch of people here for a lot of different reasons. When people think about what I'm doing, running for Congress, they have all kinds of models about what they think that's about. But I start from a different place. I start with what is it we're trying to do and what must we accomplish? So I've been working on the climate issue for about 30 years, worked in Earth First, done videos, worked with scientists, and after 33 years of working on it, nothing is really happening. And now 97% of Greenland's ice sheet is melting. So that's why I'm asking, what are we actually trying to do? Now some people in this election, they're going to vote for Huffman because they think, oh, well, we want this guy who seems to be the typical liberal congressman and we like him on the issues. Well, we all are really good on the issues. KMUD's fabulous. We have Democracy Now!, all kinds of marijuana and ecology programming. You're going to hear all these speakers. This is part of our culture. But still, the changes that are needed aren't happening. Just 2 years ago, when I ran for Congress in 2012, only 50% of Greenland's ice sheet was melting. A month after the June 2012 primary, it was up to 97%. And if the whole thing goes, we're looking at a 20-foot global sea level increase. So what I'm doing is I'm a climate organizer who is trying to keep the Greenland and West Antarctic ice sheets intact first and foremost. And what that requires of us solves a lot of our other problems like marijuana, sustainability, energy. So what I want to ask you to think about when you leave here is what kind of change is needed to accomplish what? And what are you going to do to get involved in making those things happen? Because most of my activism has been unpaid. I've been doing it my whole life. I'm 56 years old. And I'm really tired of doing things that are symbolic or even just righteous because it's the right way to be, a right way to do things. You know, if we don't keep the Greenland ice sheet intact, we're looking at the end of civilization. And the problem is that all of us have lived our lives as if things weren't that bad. And after 2000, when Bush stole the election, when the Supreme Court let them have it, when Al Gore let Bush have the presidency, when Nancy Pelosi wouldn't impeach him, when Obama got elected and he was almost as bad on every issue, I think people just tuned out of the sense of being activists. I remember going down to San Francisco right after Bush started those wars and thinking, gosh, we could have 5 million people here and Bush wouldn't give a damn. Because Bush is a psychopath. He has no conscience. So my challenge to Huffman is not that Huffman is somehow a bad person. I like Jared. He likes me. We get along really well. But the problem is he's using the old model of going in and shaking hands with these people, and that has shown it can't work. What I'm talking about doing is taking Earth First direct action approaches and going in and making a national stink so that the rest of the country starts to look at, first of all, how severe the crises are. And once you do that, then you can start to look at, well, how profound changes must we make? And that's where you get into what I'm talking about and what I think we're about here. It's about bioregionalism. The best way to get off fossil fuels and nuclear power is to eliminate your need to use them. So anything that is produced locally is not going to have to use fossil fuels to run it across the country. So the first thing we have to do is design an economy that meets our needs as close to home as possible. And that should be the goal for the whole nation. So my campaign is about calling President Obama to launch a national climate emergency response similar to the national emergency response of FDR during World War II, and to put trillions of federal dollars into a program that would send the money to the counties, the bioregions, and the cities so that we can then design what kind of economy we want to have. We can decide what kind of laws and rules we want to have regarding marijuana. But we have to step up and realize that we are agents of change. And that's the biggest barrier I see right now, is that people just have tuned out. And so again, I'll ask you, what are we trying to do? Now, I'd like you to remember three things from my little talk. The first one is pot. But I mean the kind that you put on your stove. I want you to picture a pot of water, and you turn the heat up, and you start to see the water boil more and more and more. Well, that's what the atmosphere is like with global warming. You put more energy into the atmosphere, it's like putting more energy into the water on the pot that you have on the stove. And when you do that, you get more evaporation, more water in the atmosphere, and when that water hits the northern cold fronts, you get more snow. So that's why global warming leads to more snow, because it causes more ocean evaporation, more water can hit the cold fronts. Now what's happened is our inaction has permanently changed the planet. This polar vortex is a result of global warming. It's very important how different the temperature is between the equator and the poles. The bigger the difference, the more energy there is to move the tropical heat to the poles, and the more active a storm system we have on the northern hemisphere. And I'm saying that because that determines how fast the jet stream goes, it determines where the jet stream goes. And what's happened is we've warmed the North Pole so much that the difference between the North Pole, think of like a polarity, positive, negative, the difference between them is diminished, and so the jet stream has slowed down. And like a top, when a top slows down, it dips further and further. That's what's happening with the jet stream, and it's why the jet stream went down into the south. It also slows it down, so the storms take longer to pass. So I'm only saying that so that you realize that we don't have any more time. This is something going on right now, and I invite you to get really serious about what matters to you, and to start thinking very seriously and strategically about how we can accomplish what we need to accomplish. Okay, the second thing I'd like you to remember is tide pools. Now, how do we determine how big a disaster the climate crisis is? Well, when I was in high school, I had a special marine biology class, and we'd go to the tide pools, and we'd measure temperature, salinity, and pH in the tide pools every hour, and then we go out into the waves and do the same thing with the ocean. Now, if you think about it, as you go through the course of the day and the tide goes out, the tide pools become isolated. And as it gets hotter and hotter, the water gets hotter, it evaporates more, leaving more salt to water. And so the critters that evolve in the tide pools evolve to handle that kind of change in temperature and salinity. But the fish that swim in the ocean, that same heat comes down and it's absorbed by the entire global ocean. So it doesn't change very much. And so the fish in the ocean evolve only limited tolerances. So if you take those fish and put them in a tide pool, that difference is enough to kill those fish. So in that case, that much of a change in salinity or temperature in the ocean would be lethal to various species. We have limitations too. And this is where the third thing is. I want you to remember 2.5 million years. 2.5 million years. That's 2.5 million years ago is when the Pleistocene started, the era of ice ages. And the reason 2.5 million years matters is because our limits are determined by what we have gone through in the last 2.5 million years. The planet was much warmer before that. Our species didn't exist. We evolved within certain limits. So our tolerances are determined by the range that we went through. And what's happened is, with CO2, is the highest it's ever been in that 2.5 million years is 290 parts per million, and we're at 400 now. The lowest it's been during the 2.5 million years is 170 parts per million. So that is about 120 part per million natural range over 2.5 million years. And now we've doubled that range. Now it's going twice as far. So we're in deep trouble. And I think we can't depend on any of the conventional ways that we've done things in the past. In the 80s, a lot of my Earth First friends, we did our tree sits and road blockades. We go to hearings and all kinds of things. And we have some fabulous groups here, conservation biology groups, to do all this great stuff. But the world has gotten much worse. And back in the 80s, we accused the Sierra Club of just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic because they were abandoning places like Headwaters Forest, which Earth First saved. Well, nowadays, the things we were doing in the 80s are rearranging the deck chairs. Because what we really have to do is deal with the fundamental structures of our society. And if we don't do that, anything else we're working on, and I'd love it when you help homeless people or do immediate things, that's a great thing to do, but at a certain point, the ice breaks, 20-foot sea level increases, and 80 of the 100 largest cities in the world will be swamped by that. To me, this is the battle line. This is like Hitler. You say, okay, we are going to do the things we need to do to stop Hitler. Well, we have to do the same thing with climate. And what we have to do, because we're so far above the natural variations, we have to get off fossil fuels as fast as we possibly can. That's the game. That's what we have to do. So, I'll tell you a little bit about marijuana. In 2012, when I ran for Congress, I was the first candidate to smoke a joint as a candidate out in public. I did it as a direct action to confront Obama, whose administration was shutting down our cannabis dispensaries. And the reason I smoked the joint as a Democratic congressional candidate was I realized that the American people were ready for it, that we were ready for legalization. And my doing that got me on MSNBC. And on MSNBC, I was able to talk directly to President Obama, and I said, no one should spend another hour in jail for marijuana. No one should feel shy or defensive about taking their medicine. And thousands of people really suffer when you shut down the dispensaries. A week later, Jay Leno said a couple of jokes about me. A month later, Obama announced that he might do an October surprise of legalizing marijuana. Now, before this happened, Obama's position was against legalization. When I was on TV, they showed clips of Obama saying he was against it. But what I think happened was Obama was ready for it too. Obama knows what marijuana is. He doesn't have mystical notions based on horror stories. And he knows no one should be in jail. So then after that, you had Colorado and Washington. And then, wouldn't you know it, Obama announced that he was ending mandatory minimums for marijuana. People were not going to be spending decades in jail. And then he said they were going to back off on the 20 states that have legalized marijuana one way or another. So he's backing off on the dispensaries. I think, and this is not to give me credit, it's more to talk about potential of what we can change. I think Obama was listening. I think what he was going to do last October 2 years ago is reschedule marijuana. Because that's the only way he could legalize it. So, we sometimes have to invent new ways of doing things. And what I'm doing as a congressional candidate is inventing a way that non-corporatists can displace the monsters who are in Congress now, because they are absolutely not going to do what has to do. And the only option we have if we want to save the planet for our kids and grandkids and the other species is we have to find a way of getting those people out. So if I don't seem like a traditional candidate, that's a good thing. People know who I am because I'm being myself, and I've been an activist, and I refine what I'm doing. And there are a lot of other people out here, Winona LaDuke, Aaron Brockovich, Jim Hightower, there are all kinds of great people who should be in government. So we have to invent a way of doing that. And I think if we don't really get centered on the real urgency of these matters, no matter how great what we're doing is, the tsunami is coming. And if we don't get far enough away in time, we're just as dead as if we stayed on the beach. So I'd just like to ask you to start thinking that way about these issues. I have an office in Garberville, right by the Presbyterian Church in Chautauqua. And we're going to be doing our own TV show about various topics like this. So if you'd like to help out with some computer stuff, or can help out with video, I'd really like to see you. So thank you very much, and thanks to everybody else who's here. You know, if you look at the tax system, I even saw a Republican this morning who was talking about the climate issue and how what we do now is we subsidize things that are bads, things that we don't want. And what we could do is put taxes on things like chemical agriculture products and then subsidize the organic ones. Then the market basically runs the show. So when I look at what's happening with the environment and the economy collapsing, I think in terms of actually what it was like to be a student at UCSD and at Annapolis. You go to Annapolis, you got your health care, you've got your food, your clothing, they give you Cornish game hens, you've got a gym, you've got all these incredible things, and it's all paid for by Uncle Sam because society, through Congress, decides that this thing is so important to our nation, protecting us, that we are going to subsidize that. Now, I feel that we should decide that not having homeless people is a top priority, that living safe in your community is a priority, and that there are all kinds of things that as the economy falls apart and people can't afford to do it for themselves, that we can support. I think we should have free public education through PhD. I think we should have single-payer health care. All of these basic things that people need, I think, should be part of the social safety net as we go through our transition to get off of fossil fuels, because the economy is not going to support people, and the way we keep people focused and together is if people are safe and they're taken care of. So what I think people should start to do is to start advocating that organic products be subsidized, or that you can get, I don't know if it would work so well with cannabis, but that there be a leveling that happens so that you don't have that advantage where the chemical produced output gives you a benefit economically. You basically want to take away that economic advantage, and once you've done that, then people will do the right thing. Hi, yeah, this brings up something that's a peeve of mine. When I got on MSNBC, one of the things I sensed was that the people at MSNBC were really glad to see a thoughtful marijuana activist organizer type. And they really liked hearing how I, as a person from Humboldt County, the Emerald Triangle, was talking about the issue. And one of the biggest problems we have now is that the people who are trying to, in legislatures, who are trying to deal with legalization of one sort or another, are sticking with these old models based on their ignorance of cannabis. So Crossfire on CNN had Patrick Kennedy and Van Jones on, and it got me really pissed off because, first of all, what they do is they start with the notion that marijuana is this thing called a drug, and therefore people taking these drugs are doing something bad, and so in exchange for making it legal, we're going to tax you so we can have all this money that we use to spend to tell kids that they shouldn't smoke marijuana. I think what we have to do is realize we now have a cultural project of having to reframe things. So the first thing we do is we tell everyone, stop calling marijuana a drug. It's a psychoactive plant. It's like coffee and alcohol comes from plants. And the issue is, what are the characteristics of that psychoactive plant that may or may not be a problem? Dr. Sanjay Gupta on his medical marijuana program did these tests, these driving tests, and it turned out that driving stoned, unless you're a novice to marijuana, is not really a problem. Yet yesterday there was some guy on Chris Hayes' program talking about, oh, the first time someone is hit or killed by a driver who's stoned, all the right-wingers are going to come out, and so it's going to be really hard to get legalization. Nonsense. I think we have liberty issues. I think we have the fact that nobody wants to spend the money or take on the moral karma of throwing people in jail for marijuana. So what we have to do is not accept how these people are framing it for us. We have to define the way we want to frame this stuff, and then we have to go out and push that framing. We should not just accept the silliness these people who don't know anything about this culture or even about marijuana are going to impose on us. Yeah, I just, along the lines of what I was just talking about, so I actually wrote a letter to Crossfire, and I recorded their program, and point by point I refuted a bunch of their nonsense. So I'd like to invite you to go to the Marijuana Lies page at my campaign website, which is caffreyforcongress.org. Probably just do a Google search for my name and find it too. It's CAFFREY forcongress.org, and I invite you to get involved. We have an opportunity now where last time there were 12 people running for this seat. Now there's Huffman and me and a creationist minister who thinks the world is 6,000 years old, who wants to give personhood to the fetus so that he can execute women for having abortions. So we have a choice now of having Huffman kind of stay isolated and not debate anybody, which is what he's doing at this point. Huffman kind of debating that kind of a person, this creationist minister who wants to execute women, or his liberal democratic policies with the kind of green marijuana culture, earth first perspectives that I will bring to the debate. Thank you.
I just want to say that this place is beautiful, and you people are beautiful, and what we do here is beautiful. And cannabis has revolutionized this region in the last 40 years, and cannabis has revolutionized much of California in the last 20 years, and is revolutionizing the entire world. And I think it's important that we here are on the forefront of that, and I think that being on the forefront of that revolution means that we do our best on our farms, we take care of the fish, we take care of the forests, we take care of our families, we take care of each other. And I think that it involves getting organized, and I think it involves paying attention. And there's a fundamental truth that, you know, every vote not cast is a vote of complicity with the status quo. So if you're not engaged and if you're not out there getting involved, like, we can make a difference. And we have a responsibility to this place, to ourselves, and to the herb that's revolutionized our lives to make that difference. And the time has never been more upon us than it is today. And I know they've been saying it's going to be legal next year for 20 years, but one of those times they're going to be right, and let's not let it happen to us. Let's make sure it happens because of us. And let's grab our flag and let's get out front.
We'll pass this down. Don't mourn, mobilize.
There are no jobs on a dead planet. If you're a 4-pack a day tobacco smoker, it matters whether you stop smoking 4 or 5 cigarettes a day or 4 packs a day. In 1990, there were reports issued by the EPA, by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the Woods Hole Research Center, saying we had to reduce our emissions 50 to 80% below 1990 levels by 2005. We missed it, and we don't get any more time. In fact, the science since then shows that we underestimated it.
Hi, I'm Andy Caffrey, and I approve this message.
And Democratic candidate for Congress right here in California, a man named Andy Caffrey, says if he wins, he will smoke a joint right on the steps of Capitol Hill, and adding that if he has to, he will even get arrested. So in other words, if he's elected, he'll take taxpayer money, get high, and not get anything done. Hey, welcome to Congress. He should fit in just fine. I think he'll fit in just fine. Oh.
You see, I'm the only guy who's willing to get arrested on the steps of the Capitol doing this.
I don't think another person should spend another hour in jail for marijuana-related crimes. There's no reason why people who are medical marijuana smokers should feel shy or defensive about taking their medicine. Their lives are ruined when President Obama comes in here and shuts down the dispensaries. Hi, I'm Andy Caffrey, and I approve this message.
And a Democratic candidate for Congress right here in California, a man named Andy Caffrey, says if he wins the election, he will smoke a joint on the steps of Capitol Hill, and if he has to, he will even get arrested. Finally, a politician who makes a promise he can actually keep. There you go. Finally. Finally. Thank you. Thank you. Well, there's a rumor going around that suggests President Obama may legalize marijuana as an October surprise to win the election. Well, yeah. And if he doesn't win, at least he'll have a way to mellow out later. So, whatever.